I know we have a very good panel here today. I want to introduce myself. I'm Mayor Brian Waller of Piscataway Township, the chair of the League Telecommunications Task Force and the past president of the organization. And thank you for coming to the Broadband Deployment and the National Infrastructure Bill seminar. Mayors and administrators are always looking for funds to help stretch their limited budgets. Although New Jersey sits between two communication hubs, New York and New Jersey, New York and Philadelphia, there are many areas of the state, both rural and urban, that lack access to broadband, and it's hurting businesses and communities. This panel is going to explore the challenges facing municipalities that are trying to improve broadband access and what funding may be available to facilitate those improvements. So I think the game plan is that Bob Doffler, who's the JAG president, Jersey Access Group president, and station manager of Bloomfield Township's gonna do some introductions, and then we're gonna turn it over to Mayor Ken Feldman, former colleague at the U.S. Conference of Mayors from the state of Colorado. He's with Council of Conley and Castleman, I believe? Helmer. Don't want to forget that one other partner there. And then also, we're going to have Chris Mitchell, who's the director of the Institute of Local Self-Reliance. They're going to do a tag team presentation. And then we're going to turn the mic over to Robert Boyle, the CEO of Planet Networks. So I think I have that straight, Bob? Yeah. Okay, thanks everybody for coming. Just sit back and enjoy the program. I believe there's, what, a couple PowerPoint presentations and a 6-minute video from Congressman Gottheimer, I believe, right? Okay, Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you. And then we'll save the Q&A for the end.
Thank you, Mayor Waller. Now, studies have shown coming out of a pandemic and coming to your first in-person conference in a while, they say that it's good to have a young, good-looking person with a warm and entertaining and calming voice. So that's the only reason why I'm on this panel. So the rest of it is going to be the experts here. I'm just here for that part to ease your mind and welcome you back to being in a conference. As the mayor mentioned, I am the president of the Jersey Access Group, JAG. My name is Bob Duthaler. On your seats, you should have all received a little information about JAG. We are the group that keeps an eye out on broadband and also other telecommunications things. In addition, most of our members also run municipal channels for their municipalities. So you can see us. We're in booth 200 row. Someone help me out? 230. 230, thank you, 230. So you can come visit us there and find out some more information. I'm going to cut it off there for me. I'm going to just introduce a quick video from Josh Gottheimer, Congressman Gottheimer. He's of the 5th District. He's going to talk a little bit about broadband, the infrastructure, and the state of New Jersey. Then I'm going to turn it over, like the mayor said, to Ken, Chris, and Robert, who are going to fill you in on everything from the Recovery Act to the infrastructure bill, and also what it's entailed to actually go into a community and build out, and some of the obstacles and things along that way. So thank you guys for joining us. Let me start the video.
Hey everyone, this is Josh Gottheimer. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there in person, but I wanted to make sure that I got to the league to discuss a basic service that every American should have affordable access to, and that's broadband. I think it's fair to say that it is important these days as running water. If you want to compete as a country, if you want to make sure you get connected to go to school or work, if you're a small business and be able to stay in business, you need to have access to high-speed internet. And I've been very focused on this for years. For even before I ran for Congress, I was focused on connecting the unconnected. So I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you. I want to thank the New Jersey chapter of the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors for inviting me to speak. As a first world country and the largest economy in the world, I think access to broadband should not be something that is just a hope for thing. And you should, if you live anywhere in our country, especially in the state of New Jersey, you shouldn't have to go to McDonald's and sit outside with a computer and get connectivity. You should be able to have connectivity at home if you want it. As you know, too many families and small businesses in the state of Jersey are still unconnected, and too many can't afford connectivity. According to a study of Microsoft data from 2019, 162 million people across the United States are not using the internet as a broadband speeds, a staggering number that shows just how unconnected parts of our country are. In 2018, nearly 17 million children lived in homes without high-speed internet, and more than 7 million didn't have computers at home. That data, according to the latest numbers, is consistent. It's only gone down a little bit. In New Jersey, especially in the northwest part of the 5th District where I live and represent, students, families, and businesses shouldn't have to move just to get basic internet. And this is an issue I hear about all the time from people, either my constituents who have a small business, or during COVID when too many young people literally couldn't get broadband connectivity. And of course, their hotspots that we gave them didn't work either because they might not have cell coverage. So this is a very big issue. And if you're trying to get telemedicine or do your homework or apply for college or apply for a job or work and you can't get connected, it's really, really difficult. And it means you can't compete. You need to connect to compete, in my opinion. This is something I worked on a lot when I worked at the Federal Communications Commission years ago, and making sure that we connect people. And I think it remains a significant issue. In many areas, close to a quarter of middle and working class households lack access to internet. In Newton, it's nearly a third. Imagine trying to do your homework, as I said, or apply for a job without access to the internet. We've got to fix that, especially because the pandemic has exacerbated the problems, as I said, that many communities lacking broadband have faced for years, from those more rural areas like Sussex and Warren counties or other parts of the state of New Jersey, the underserved and unserved, and also lower income communities. You know, we all realize, I hope, the importance of this connectivity during COVID. And one thing that I fought for in the COVID packages and the bipartisan packages that Democrats and Republicans backed was getting more resources for broadband, for connectivity, for those who were unconnected. And we worked very hard and got a lot of resources that will continue to connect parts of the northwest part of the state that I represent, and we're getting those dollars out the door. And I want to thank many of our mayors who've done a phenomenal job fighting to get to light up dark fiber, to bring fiber to areas where there has been no connectivity, in roads and streets where there's just been nothing, including some of our town halls. Without broadband, people aren't able to fully access their work, school, or telehealth. Small businesses have trouble operating, and access to goods and services are very limited. One of my constituents in Sussex County told me a story about how she spent large parts of the pandemic literally working from her car at her local Starbucks parking lot because the home internet she got was so unreliable. These communities need broadband infrastructure and increased internet speeds to keep up with the 21st century. A bipartisan infrastructure bill will help ensure that all communities across the country have access to broadband internet by investing more than $65 million to expand high-speed internet across America. $42 billion literally goes to building broadband networks that currently lack it. And again, this is directly to communities like Sussex and Warren County, where there's pockets with no connectivity. And I know this is an issue in the Pinelands and other areas in the state of New Jersey. The bill also invests in helping low-income communities connect to broadband, and it directs the FCC to create a plan for universal service across America, meaning that communities who struggled during the pandemic because of lack of access will finally have the service they need to thrive. Not to mention, the Build Back Better Act will invest further in broadband expansion. That's the reconciliation package that we're also working on, which, by the way, also reinstates the state and local tax deduction and cuts taxes for Jersey. Let's just talk about the importance of that. But this bill also will help ensure that high-speed internet is more affordable for folks. Municipalities will be able to access grant investment from the infrastructure bill, and we will begin to learn more about that grant process now that the bill has become law. Additionally, the federal government is helping to ensure that all communities are properly mapped so we can understand just who does and does not have access to broadband. Mapping is so important. We actually know where we need to put broadband instead of building in places and adding more resources to places that already have broadband, as you know so well. We don't want to overbuild. We want to make sure we target to the places that actually need it. Greater broadband access is something that I, again, have been fighting for a very long time. I'm very proud that a couple of the bills that I worked on and helped get across the finish line in the Congress, especially the one at the end of last year, plus the bipartisan infrastructure bill, will really help make this a reality and get people connected. It's a huge win for Jersey, for our country, for my district, for bipartisan governing, and for our hardworking families and for all of our communities. So I'm grateful. We live in the greatest country in the entire world, and our families and our small businesses and our students should be able to thrive and compete, and the internet shouldn't be a reason why they can't. By working together, I know with all of our communities coming together, Democrats and Republicans, mayors, council, county, you name it, if we all come together and work together, there's no reason our best days shouldn't always be ahead of us. Thank you so much for having me, and God bless.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I don't know how many of you were at the wireless session this morning, but I'll start here with what I said then. It's really good to see you all in person. It's nice to be out interacting with colleagues one-on-one. Again, my name is Ken Feldman. I am, as Mayor Waller so graciously remembered, a former elected official. I've served on city council and as mayor of my town for 14 years. And I don't know why it says that up in the left-hand corner, but it went wonky. Okay. Well, look at that. Uh-oh. It worked before. Yeah. Let's see how this works. Anyway, in my law practice, I work with local governments on broadband and telecommunications and utility issues. I work probably in about 15 different states, including New Jersey, and it's really, I grew up here. It's always nice to come back and to be with you. So we have, and the Congressman mentioned this a little bit, there was a bill passed earlier this year that you're probably all familiar with, the American Rescue Plan, and now the Infrastructure Act, which just passed. As somebody who served as an elected official, all right, let's try to figure out who wants to do this while I'm talking. Somebody who served as an elected official during years when we were looking at community development block grant money go down, 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 down every year, I will tell you, and I do not think we are exaggerating, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The money that is becoming available to local governments through the feds is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. As somebody who's been fighting for broadband funding for many, many years, I can't tell you how excited I am that the government is finally recognizing how important this is, and I certainly think the pandemic has sent the message that for those who didn't get it before now understand how important connectivity is. So we can't screw this up is what I'm trying to get to here, and all of you have a role in helping achieve that goal. So the American Rescue Plan and the Jobs Act, or Infrastructure and Jobs Act, let's talk about the rescue plan first. That became effective in March, and most of the language of this bill talks about spending money to address pandemic-related influences and impacts, but it has a certain amount of money set aside for broadband, and that's what I'm going to focus on here. I should have mentioned that my good friend and colleague Chris Mitchell is, even though he's sitting, he's doing this presentation with me, and he's going to periodically jump in and add his 2 cents or correct my mistakes, as the case may be, when they get here. So this legislation created non-entitlement units of local government. I don't know where they came up with these terms, and metropolitan cities and counties. Those were the 3 different categories. Money that went to counties and to metropolitan cities directly from the Treasury Department. Non-entitlement units of local government, which are basically smaller municipalities, medium-sized and smaller municipalities, are supposed to get that money through their state government. It would flow from the Treasury Department to a state entity and then to local governments. Not a grant program, not something you have to apply for and prove you're entitled to it and demonstrate, here's how we're going to spend it. If you meet the criteria of the Rescue Plan Act, you're entitled to get that money. And I'm going to talk in a slide or two about, I'll have information on what New Jersey has done with that. That money can be spent for infrastructure, for water, for sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So if you have a broadband project, if you're in some of those rural and semi-rural areas that the Congressman mentioned, and you can't get the big providers to come in and build good broadband in your community, one way to do it is build some of it yourself and then encourage companies to come in after you've reduced their cost of doing business, and now you have a source of funding to do that. The rescue plan also created the Coronavirus Capital Project Fund, which is a separate pool of $10 billion. And Chris, you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. I think, is this on? No, it is. I guess a good way to start is just to say we're going to be talking about several different pots of money, and there is no good way to organize that. So the CCPF, which is this $10 billion fund within the rescue plan, can be thought of as a separate bucket of money that was included in the rescue plan, but has its own rules and requirements. The state of New Jersey is going to get $195 million through that. The rules for that just came out recently. The state will have to look at what NTIA is going to require. The state will have to put together an application, but more or less it gets the money and it can then use it in a variety of ways. This is the most flexible spending, I would say, of all of the pots of money that are currently available for broadband infrastructure. One of the things that I'm sure we'll talk about, but in this case, a lot of the rules in this program, are things that states should do. States should direct the money to less than 100 megabit and 100 megabit down and 20 megabit up. So for those who are not familiar with this, it's just worth noting, most of the pots of money we're talking about use a trigger of 25 megabits down and 3 megabits up for whether or not households would be eligible for spending, or if they should be prioritized in spending. This is the one program that is more future-looking. That speed definition, 25 down and 3 up, is what we used to think of as being necessary for broadband pre-pandemic. Almost all the pots of money require more build-out, but in this case, ARPA, the $10 billion fund that will be going to the states directly, that is the one that can be used in the areas that may have 30, 40 megabit. They may have good DSL, but they don't have very good service overall. Other pots of money cannot be used for those households or not at first. So it's very important to keep an eye on this because it's the most flexible in terms of all the funding. Did you want to ask a quick question?
Yeah, when you talk about flexibility, I'm in a very rural county. We've got very poor radio communication, cell phone communication.
Okay. I'll just ask you to keep it really quick because I'm going to have to repeat anything you say.
Okay. I mean,
So
not be addressed at the same time?
people that are in, we're going to have time for Q&A in the end.
Q&A at the end.
But I do want to, the flexibility question is a good one in terms of if you are in a very rural area and most people do not have the basic service of 25 down, 3 up, you got a lot of places to spend this money. If you're in Camden, if you're in other places where you have cable service and maybe there's a couple of neighborhoods that aren't as well served, this is the kind of place, that's the kind of place you can spend this money. So if you're in a very rural area, you're going to have lots of options. But if you're in an area that's a little bit more mixed, this is a very special fund.
All right. So the Treasury Department was released what they called their interim final rules in May. And we keep waiting for the final rules to come out. They have not. Some of those rules were a little bit confusing, and they have issued a couple of FAQs about what they intended their rules to mean. This talks a little bit, the slide talks a little bit about what I already mentioned about who gets the funding and where it comes from. But it did make it clear, and it wasn't 100% clear, that any of the infrastructure money from ARPA can be used for broadband.
Now on this, I'd just like to mention, one of the issues that we see is that your state or your city attorney, your county attorney, might be looking at this language and saying, wait a minute, I don't know if we can spend this money here or not. The rules that came out, part of the reason that they're not finalized yet is a lot of us were very angry because we felt that these rules would not be available to serve the overwhelming need we have in metropolitan areas or areas that are on the edge of metropolitan areas. And Treasury has gone out of its way to not say they're not going to enforce the rules, but a lot of the rules are should and rather than should rather than shall. And you're going to have to work with your city attorneys in some cases to make sure they're correctly interpreting these rules. It would be a very bad idea to use this money to build out to very wealthy areas of town that already have FiOS, but if you're on the edge and you have a neighborhood where some people have decent access, or even a lot of people have good access, but a number of people do not have reliable access at 25.3, you can build out to all of them using that money. That's what that's in some of the guidance that Ken's talking about. So this is an area where I would say if you're looking at it, you're confused, you're getting some pushback from a city attorney, reach out to me, reach out to someone, and we can help you put you in touch with the documents you'll need to see.
Yeah, just another concrete example there, right? So what does it mean to say we can spend it if we don't reliably get 25.3 speeds? The FAQs that Treasury put out was, we are going to give great discretion to the local communities to figure out what reliable means. So if there's a broadband map that maybe is based on bad data, and many of the broadband speed maps today are based on bad data, it's not like there's one place that you look and say it's reliable or it's not. You can do a survey on your town website, and if you determine that half the town doesn't get reliable 25.3 service, or a quarter of the town, I think you've got a pretty good case under these rules that you can spend that money for that purpose. And it doesn't just have to be in that area. So if you want to build a town-wide network and you're really fixing a bad problem for a third of the town and just improving things generally for the rest of the town, that's okay too, based on these FAQ responses from Treasury.
And for people who are not technical, there is no accepted mechanism for determining what is reliable and what isn't. So it very much is something that you'll want to develop a process around and make a strong case for, but there's no accepted measurement to date for that answer.
I have told people if your teenagers are pissed that they keep getting knocked off while they're trying to play games, that probably counts as unreliable service. All right, so we just talked about what's on this slide a little bit about the flexibility that the interim rules provide, that we have the discretion to determine what's reliable. I'm not going to read through this. I will tell you, we're trying to figure out a way, and I don't know what the process is yet, for the league to make these PowerPoint presentations available. If you want this and you give me your card after the session, I'll stick around for a while. I will get it to you before the league figures out how to get it to you. No offense to the league, but I'll just email it to you in the next 24 hours and you'll have it. So I tried to get a little bit of information from the state on, this money comes from the feds, some of it to the state and then to be distributed out. The Division of Local Government Services has a website. This is probably why you want to get the PowerPoint, because you'll have the link to some of this information. And in addition to what the state will require, you have to have a federal DUNS number, and there's a way to get that if you don't have it. Just basically, this tells you what you need to have in place in order to access the money.
And I think I just want to say this one more time because it is so confusing, but within the American Rescue Plan, we might think of 3 different distinct triggers for broadband money. One is the local aid that is delivered directly to you. Half of it has already arrived. Another half of it will be in the spring of next year. Then there's the money the state is getting. Those are both within those rules we were just talking about, where you have to define the reliability. This other $195 million is separate from that and will be coming out at some point next year.
One of the problems is, and it may just be that I haven't figured out every place I need to research this yet, but I haven't figured out exactly what department within the state government is going to be getting all of this money to distribute, the $195 million that Chris just mentioned. It's not going to cable. It's not going to cable. I'm pretty sure it's not going to cable because
Nancy is prepared to receive $195 million.
Yeah, right.
Our agency gives out, we deal with cable licensing, so we have to run points. But DCA is better as a better mechanism for distributing funds. So I would say, if you're saying that DCA is doing it, I don't know. I'm here to gather information as well.
So there's still some states, it seems like the governors are preparing to receive it. In some cases, the legislature is taking action. I don't always know which is which.
Yeah. Nancy, we can talk. If you get the money, we'll need to talk. Okay. Let's move to the Infrastructure Act. So we could probably spend the rest of the session belly aching over why this took so damn long, but the president has signed it, and we are going to look forward, right? $42 billion in grant programs related to broadband. I mean, when I talk about once in a generation, this is what I mean. We've never seen anything even close to this in the last 25 or 30 years. Anyway, great opportunity. So we have $42 billion in grant programs. It's going to be different than ARPA. The money is going to flow not from Treasury. It's going to go into the Commerce Department, and the agency within the Commerce Department, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, is going to get that money. And they are going to funnel that money down to the state. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The bill also creates the Digital Equity Act, so there's another pot of money that provides grants for inclusion and equity in the provision of broadband. NTIA is going to have 6 months to create the rules on how this program is going to work. So if you're a nerd like Chris and I are, and you get listserv things sent to you every day with articles about telecom policy, all the articles now are like, what's going to happen next with the broadband money? And everybody's kind of weighing in on, here's the deadline for this, and here's the deadline for that. There's just a lot of stuff. We're going to summarize some of it now, but there's a lot of things that are going to happen and hurdles that are going to have to get jumped before this money gets to City Hall.
Yes, and one of the things that we're going to see with both the $10 billion Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund, which was part of Rescue Plan, and this, that money's not going to be available soon. In both cases, there's a series of hurdles that have to be overcome. So here, NTIA has to write the rules. The states have to develop plans to comply with the rules. Then the states can get some of the money and start handing it out to in the program. They have to develop rules around those programs. So one of the things that we're curious about is a number of states have now 3 or 4 different sets of buckets with different sets of rules. They have to figure out how they're going to hand all this money out, track it all, and everything else. So we're not expecting this money to be going out the door in January.
All right. So again, some of this has been mentioned briefly. One of the things the states are going to have to do when the NTIA creates the rules, states are actually going to have to apply and say, we actually do want the money for our state. If your state, for some reason, decides not to do that, local governments may apply directly. So that was kind of a fail-safe provision that some of us fought for in this bill. There are some states around the country, not this one, thankfully, that have not worked very well with their local governments and don't think funding broadband in rural communities is the government's role. And there was a fear that there are some states that may walk away from this money. There's a provision in the bill that says if your state does that, the local government can apply directly for it.
And not just that, but in several of these programs, if the states aren't working with a local government proactively, like the NTIA or Treasury has to make a determination that local governments are being consulted in some of these projects. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but it's going to be good.
So similar to ARPA, we have the unserved areas is the don't get reliable access to 25 down, 3 up speeds, and that's unserved. Underserved is if you get 100 down and 20 up, and then we have definitions for what's a high cost area. So those are the different categories, and as you'll see in a second, some of the money first goes to unserved, and then we move down from there.
And this is, I think, the least flexible pot. This money should be spent first in the areas that have the greatest needs, if it's possible, because you don't want to spend flexible money in non-flexible areas and then be in a situation where you're having trouble spending less flexible money.
How are we doing on time, Mr. Moderator? Okay. So here's one of the first things that have to happen. I mentioned that the maps are not that good. The maps are awful, actually, and the FCC is required by this law to improve mapping, because if you want to say, well, how do I know if I'm unserved or underserved? Step 1 is for the FCC to do a better job with the maps. That is going to take probably 3 to 6 months, and the FCC now has to get to work on that. And hopefully by that time, by next spring, as the NTIA is coming out with rules for how it's going to deliver this money to the states, you will have a better idea of where your community stands on these maps.
There will be tremendous pressure on the FCC because actually the amount of money that will come to New Jersey will be dependent on these maps. This money is allocated largely on a percentage of the households that do not have decent service. So states in the Midwest, where I'm from, states in the West, we're probably going to do a lot better. States in the Northeast are not going to do as well. And it'll be very important to make sure the state and your local governments are engaged, because the new maps are supposed to have a challenge process where if you have providers that are systematically, yes, I don't think that's the right word I was looking for, but I got stuck on it anyway. But anyway, if they're significantly overstating their claims, there will be a process for local and state governments to challenge that. It will be important to be on top of that as it happens, because I do not think we're going to have a lot of time after those maps are released before they're trying to make a determination on how much money each state gets based on those maps.
Right. And you might recall in the congressman's video where he put his slide up and it said $100 million for broadband from the infrastructure. That's a minimum. So every state gets at least $100 million. Then based on this criteria, you add to that.
Yes, so I would think that Rhode Island and New Jersey, Delaware are likely to be closer to 100 million than a lot of other states, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. So again, allowable uses for these monies: unserved areas, underserved areas. After those pots of money are spent, there's going to be money to connect community anchor institutions, schools, libraries, hospitals. There is money for local mapping and planning. There's going to be some money, not a lot, but there will be some money for broadband planning. So if your community, especially if you live in a county where you have multiple municipalities and it's semi-rural or rural, and you want to put together a plan, what can we do to help improve connectivity in our area? You can create intergovernmental agreements, and you can do some actual broadband planning to determine what would work best in your region, not just in your municipality. And frankly, there's strength in numbers. So if you get multiple rural communities working together, you're going to maximize your chances of getting some of this money.
And just a piece of advice on this, like I think some of you may be from areas where your predominant concern is low-income families who are not adopting something that is available. This is where it's a good time to think about them separately in terms of where you have public housing that's concentrated and you have public housing that's more dispersed, or you have like Section 8 families and things like that. The challenge of solving public housing where it's more concentrated is much easier. It's a much less of a challenge. And so don't think of this as one challenge with low-income families. Start to think about it as discrete chunks. The hardest one to solve is going to be where we have people spread out in poverty. Where you have people really concentrated, the investments work a lot better.
Okay, a couple more slides, and then we will be wrapping up. So when the state gets its money, it needs to prioritize unserved areas. It has to certify to the assistant secretary, that's the director of the NTIA, that we're going to ensure that we have coverage in these unserved locations. It's going to have to list its priorities, and it's going to have to meet these priorities that are on the bottom of the slide. As Chris mentioned earlier, when the state develops its plan, it is required by the statute to incorporate feedback from the public. So that, that will mean the community, that will mean the local governments impacted, it'll probably mean the industry providers and the infrastructure companies. Anybody who wants to have a say in how the state puts together its rules for these sub-grants should have a seat at the table, and the state is going to have to represent to the federal government that it has done that successfully, which means if you think you've been cut out of the process, you will have a say and a seat at that table. Don't mean to be a little bit of a downer here, but Chris and I were looking at a recent Pew Research study which pointed out that New Jersey is one of only 10 states that does not have dedicated funding for broadband and no dedicated broadband office. There's a division of local government booth here at the conference, and I checked with them. They don't have anything in the works. I tried for a couple of days to reach somebody at the State Office of Information Technology, which I know is kind of set up to be more internal to help operate the state government's infrastructure, but in the hopes of maybe finding out if there's a plan to figure out how the state of New Jersey is going to deal with this money and what department is going to be making the rules. I had the unfortunate experience of, one, being on their website and not finding a phone number, finding a couple of phone numbers for them based on a Google search, none of which worked, and clicking on their icon to send them an email and having that not work either. So I don't know at this point what Department of State Government is going to be on top of this. We had Senator O'Scanlan that was on the wireless panel this morning. So I was encouraging him to try to start figuring out how we're going to deal with this because there doesn't seem to be any kind of reliable information, at least on the state government website, as to how New Jersey is going to be reacting as a state to this federal money. All right, and with that.
Well, okay, so I have one concluding comment, which is that, so my work for 15 years is focused on how local governments can make investments in a variety of ways to improve service. And it's very exciting that several aspects of these, wow, I look so young there. I need to get new pictures. This money, in many, I don't know if it's every case, but in at least 2 of the cases, requires that states prioritize projects that are proposed and would be owned by local governments or cooperatives. And I think that's really important, and that does not mean that every city should go out and build their own network, but it does mean that if cities are thinking about that, or if they have a provider that they would work with where they can get the money, they can own the infrastructure and work out a good deal with the provider for a long-term lease for it, or to work with multiple providers, those options are on the table, and those should be prioritized projects under the rules that New Jersey should be developing.
And I'll just add to that. I'm glad Chris mentioned it. This whole concept of public-private partnership, and you'll hear the reference to P3s over and over and over again. There are many, many, many different ways those things can happen. There's not one format that if you want to do a public-private partnership, here's how you do it. There are some local governments that have decided we want to be a service provider. We want to be an internet service provider. They're in the minority. Some of them do it very well. A few of them have not done it very well. But then there's a variety of partnerships. You may already have some infrastructure. If you've connected your public safety communications, or you've got a public works building on one side of town that's got fiber connectivity back to town hall, you may already have excess capacity in some of your infrastructure that can be used to entice a private sector company to come in and tie into that and then build from there. The whole point is, in the more costly areas to build these networks, the rural areas, if you can reduce the cost of doing business for a private company that wants to come in, or if you can build some infrastructure, if you have a tower site, if you have your own poles where you have the ability to say, we've got them up now, who wants to come in and use them? You've reduced the cost of business for the service provider, who then may be able to come in and provide better broadband where you never had it before. And now we have some money where actually we can do some planning to determine how to do that. So money's not going to be flowing until probably the end of next year at the earliest, but we do have some time to plan and to get ready for it and to figure out how we're going to deal with it. And I wish you all the best and great success in doing that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out. And thank you, Ken, and thank you, Chris. My name is Robert Boyle, and I'm the CEO of Planet Networks. We are an internet service provider that's been serving New Jersey since 1994. We started with dial-up a long, long time ago. Most of you probably remember that. But a few years ago, we decided to start building fiber again. And we started this project back in '99, but the regulations and the ability to get on poles and everything was very difficult at the time. And the rules were constantly changing. So a few years ago, Congress passed the American was that my brain is blanking right now, I'm trying to remember what the heck the ARRA, the American Reinvestment Act, yeah. So basically Congress said, you will allow competitors to be on your poles, and this is how you're going to do it. And so that basically kind of cleared the way to make it a lot easier for us to get access to the conduit and telephone poles that we need. It's not cost effective to put up our own telephone poles also. Most towns really wouldn't like that very much. There are already too many, and so we're getting onto the poles is the biggest obstacle to building a competitive network. We are building in northwestern New Jersey right now, and we're continuing to expand out of Sussex and Warren and Morris counties, and we're going to continue building those areas out, and we're interested in working with rural communities and suburban communities in other areas of the state. So today we offer 10 gigs up and 10 gigs down in all of our footprint. So you get 10,000 up and 10,000 down at very reasonable prices. So we typically wind up getting most of the market when we build somewhere. So digital divide in America, especially New Jersey, we see this all over the place where you have cities where you have Fios on every street, and then one town over you have bad cable and slow DSL, and and that's it. So there's a huge demand for better service all over New Jersey, as you guys know, and we actually build everything ourselves. So we have our own trucks we run. We build everything. We have all the taps we put up. We actually manufacture ourselves. We have we're very vertically integrated, which is unusual for a phone company, but it's the only way to drive the cost out of the process in order to make it so that it's cost effective to build in these rural communities. Public is excited and our customers love us. We've never had anyone cancel our fiber service who has it, except for one exception where someone believed the cable company's $9.95 advertising. So other than that, we've never had anyone cancel. So Deloitte says U.S. needs to invest $130 billion to $150 billion in fiber in the next 5 to 7 years. We think that all of these trucks, by the way, everything you see, those are all our vehicles and our people actually installing fiber. We don't install anything that's not fiber. Right now, we have a waiting list of over 38,000 people who want our service in Sussex and Morris and Warren counties. So, the 3 of them in the room right here. So, we work with municipalities. So we are a CLEC, so we're a competitive local exchange carrier, which is basically a different type of phone company, like Verizon or CenturyLink. We have 40 municipal rights-of-way. We've already negotiated with the towns. New Jersey law is pretty straightforward on that, and that basically we have to ask, the municipalities have to grant right-of-way access, and basically the only thing that they can request in return is to cover any actual expenses they have for legal fees or any engineering or anything else. So New Jersey is pretty straightforward compared to some of the other states. We provide service to everyone. So there are a lot of other CLECs in New Jersey who provide services to businesses or cell towers or whatever, but they don't provide service to residential. As far as I know, we're the only fiber company in New Jersey that's building to every single address in the areas we serve, and that is building residential service. So we provide corporate, schools, governments, cellular carriers, large telecom companies, small businesses, consumers, everyone. So we serve everyone in the markets that we build service in. When we look for where we're going to build, we build in areas where we have people who want our service. So we won't build somewhere where they already have Fios and they have like Comcast, and Comcast has a good network. Comcast, because lots of different networks that have been put together over the years. Some of the networks are better than others, but if they have 1 or 2 good providers, then there's really no point in us building there, because there are so many areas that are so underserved that makes a lot more sense to build in. So that's where we build. We build in areas where people are desperate for service, and that helps make the numbers work. Because if we get a third of the customers in an area, then the numbers don't work, and we don't get a good return on our investment. And it's very difficult for us to, because we're small, we're privately held, we're funded internally. We need to get a good return on our investment in order to be able to invest and build more infrastructure. So we're very excited about these bills, because they're going to help a lot. And we're very open, because we're small and we're reasonable people, we're very open to public-private partnerships. We're open to any type of a co-op. We also, our entire infrastructure, the way we've built it, is an open network. So if other ISPs or a municipality or someone wanted to use our fiber to provide services, we're absolutely open and fine to do that, and willing to work on any kind of thing that makes sense. Make sure it's adjacent to or near existing or available connectivity. One of the things in the bill, in the most recent infrastructure bill, is middle mile networks. So we just spent, we're not done yet, but we just built from Newton, where we're based, down to Knowlton in New Jersey, and that build cost us, by the time we're all done, it'll be $750,000 because there was no connectivity along that whole corridor. So we have 0 customers on that right now. There's no, actually, we have a handful of people we turned up because they were really desperate, and we helped them out. Camp for kids with cancer and like a couple other little stores and restaurants and stuff. But for the most part, we haven't turned anything up on that network yet. And that network was built to provide service to other areas that we want to serve. But so that middle mile network is really hard, because if you want service in your town, but the nearest fiber is 10 miles away or 15 miles away, especially if you're going on a state highway, you're talking about $30,000 up to $40,000 a mile to run fiber. So it gets very expensive. So building those middle mile networks is important, and there is funding in the infrastructure bill for those types of networks. And there's no reason that one town has to go at it alone. We can kind of all cooperate and say, hey, you know what, these 5 towns need service. We want service there too, so let's all cooperate and build service down this rural area to provide the connectivity. Easy to work with local municipal government and law enforcement. That's really so important, because we're working with them every single day. There are some towns that are open, welcome us with open arms. There are other ones who say, we already have somebody here, we don't want you. And and we say, well, you can't say that. It's not your choice. The law is very clear that you have to grant us access to the right of way, but sometimes they make it really difficult. And there are 565 municipalities in New Jersey, so the ones that are difficult, we just say, okay, fine, we'll just go to the next town, the ones who want our services. And then available funding and reasonable ROI are the 2 other kind of key factors for us to build in an area. So some ordinances keep fiber away. Some municipalities in New Jersey want 50 cents a foot for permits, and they want part of your fiber that you build, or they want access to the ducts or whatever. And so these types of ordinances, we basically say, look, these are the costs. So it's almost 3 times as much to build in some towns as others. We can also go to court and get some of these ordinances overturned because they're not legal according to New Jersey law and FCC rules, but we just go to the next town instead because it's just easier. So we have limited capital to deploy, limited time to build, huge numbers of people who want service. And so if there's municipalities that are easy to work with, then we want to build there, and we'll focus our efforts there. So as a municipality, really, I think the biggest thing that you can do to spur competitive broadband providers to come to your town is work with them and be easy. Don't treat us like the enemy. We're not trying to put like microcells up on every tower. We're not putting big pedestals up in the middle of your sidewalks. Everything that we do is up in the air. You don't even notice it, or it's underground if you have underground utilities. So basically, that's be easy to work with, and that's really key. A lot of times the municipality doesn't really understand and thinks that we can do all kinds of things with the poles and put up antennas and whatever else, and they want to restrict that. We're very limited on what we can do with all of our pole attachment agreements. So we have agreements with Atlantic City Electrical, PSE&G, JCP&L, Sussex Rural Electric. We're in the process of getting one with the local municipality that operates their own electrical system. But we have to follow the NESC standards, which is what all of the utility companies follow for their outside plant. It's like the NEC code, but for telephone poles and power delivery and communication systems. All of the pole owners go out and they send inspectors to inspect everything that we do. So that's all done, for you. You don't need to worry about doing that. That's all kind of part of the process with our pole permits. And we have a performance bond with the pole owners. And then we have a very detailed list of rules and what we can and can't do with all the pole owners. And so we can't mount boxes or antennas or anything. So all of those kinds of things are all already forbidden in our agreements, and pretty much every CLEC would build has those same kinds of rules. So when we build a new fiber network, we go into a town, we say, hey, you know what, there's a lot of demand here, we want to build here, And then we do a survey first. We do a lot of stuff on social media to build interest, and then we also have we also send out postcards, or have sometimes the town will post something on their website, say, hey, here's a provider who's interested in coming into our town. If you're interested, fill out their survey. And so once we say, hey, you know what, there's enough interest in this town, or borough or township or whatever, city to make sense, we'll survey the polls. What we have to do is we have to go around and take pictures of every single pole, where everything is on it, and we have to do engineering to figure out where we can attach. And then we have to apply for permits with the pole owners. So sometimes it's a power company, sometimes it's a city, sometimes it's the telephone company, and then we have to get approval. And then once we do that, then we have to do what's called make ready, which is if things have to be moved up or down, or pole has to be replaced, or whatever, that work has to be done. And then we install steel cable in between all of the poles. And then after that's done, we go back through and we put our backbone fiber up. And after that fiber's up, that's when we start telling people, hey, service is going to be available in a couple of weeks. And then we start installing our feeder fibers, which go down to all the different neighborhoods. And then we install taps, which are in front of every 8 houses. There's a tap that provides service to those 8 houses. And then we install the customer drops when they order service. So it's a multi-step process, and it takes 6 to 9 months. We've done it in as little as 4 months, and sometimes we have some places where we're still doing it a year and a half later, because some of it, if it's a state highway, we have to have police, we have to have a crash truck. It has to be on, we have to work from 9 to 3:30 for NJDOT rules. So there's a lot of different factors that affect how quickly we can build in different areas. If it's a very rural area, it's not a big deal. Our guys can work from sun up till sundown, and they just work, and we'll have our flaggers there, and they're directing traffic, the one car that comes every once in a while. So so cooperation and communication is key to having successful deployment. We have a number of municipalities that we're in right now. I think we're in 17 or 18 different municipalities that we're providing service in. And we have a few that are almost 100% coverage, and we're working on building out 100% coverage in the others, but it's going to take a couple years. Honest and open communications on all sides. If you guys have concerns, let us know. We're always very honest with what we're doing, how we're doing it, where we're doing it. Set realistic expectations, assume positive intent. We always engage with the police and municipal leaders so that they know what we're doing, so that when someone comes to the town and says, hey, what's going on here, you guys aren't caught blindsided, like, oh, we don't know what's going on. So and then we also work with the police departments, and we'll typically say, hey, we're going to be working on this street. Do you want us to have police there? Do you not want us to have police there? Depending on how how congested it is. Obviously, if it's a big intersection, then we'll have police there. If not, we'll just flag. So and then the other thing is we have enough problems hiring staff, with equipment breaking, supply shortages, complicated business to begin with, telephone and cable companies that don't want us to build, and don't want us to compete against them, because wherever we build, we typically wind up with within a year 80 to 90% of the customers. And so please try to make building in your municipality easy. If you do that, then we come and we love working with you guys. And our customers love us, and the municipalities that we serve love us, and we love you guys for providing this great opportunity. So with the new funding, we'll be even happier to build in your municipality, because our biggest thing that holds us up right now from building is access to capital. So capital markets are really hot, but not for small providers. So if you're a publicly traded company, then your stock is doing great. It's really easy to raise money. Not so easy for us. And we're bringing 10 gigs up and 10 gigs down to our entire footprint today. And we're actually experimenting with 40 gig equipment now. So you're talking about 100 times faster than basic cable, and 250 times faster than DSL. And that's what we're deploying today. And that's throughout our whole entire footprint. And so we're not the enemy. We come in peace. We want to make your municipality better. Sometimes it's very, and I know that sometimes municipalities have experiences with some providers where they're not going to be, they're trying to put small cell in, and they won't tell them, and they'll try to be sneaky about it. We're building fiber everywhere. That's what we do, and it's pretty straightforward. So, and I think that's it. So I don't. Thank you.
Okay, while Bob is getting the mic for the folks that might want to ask some questions, one of the things that we're doing in Piscataway Township over the last 15 years, we have a lot of fiber optic in our roadway where we've given permission, and we have strands fiber. So now that we receive some of the federal monies there, now we're going to go to the last mile and actually connect up our parks with Wi-Fi. And you're probably saying, what the hell you want to connect up parks for? Well, one of the biggest problems you have in parks, like I know in Piscataway Township, we have 27 municipal parks. You tend to have problems in parks. And it's for security purposes that we'll have the broadband there, but we'll allow for install of cameras to be fed back to the police department for monitoring, as well as our signalized intersections, which further adds to the broadband in general. So it actually takes care of two problems. And one, people will actually, when they go to enjoy time with their families in the parks, they'll have access to broadband. And then we, in turn, have safety measures to further enhance the safety when people are using our parks, as well as our intersections. And that would not have happened, Ken, unless the funds, the COVID funds that we did receive. Sure, go ahead.
So I love that example, and I'm going to give you another one related to parks. And this all fits under the category of smart cities and the Internet of Things, right? If you have good broadband networks and you're collecting data, and then you have smart people in your town who can figure out how to use it to make your community better. The city of Las Vegas in their parks, they were spending a lot of money sending cops out to the parks after hours when they had people loitering in the parks. They put sensors on all the different lights in the park, and it was like first warning. They had a speaker would come out and say, the park closed at 10 p.m., you need to leave the park. More than half the time, that got the person out of the park. It happened a second time. After 15 minutes, it happened again. After a third time, it happened again, and there was a signal that went from one of the poles, because it can be dangerous going into a park at night and you got a vagrant and you don't know who it is, but it would give the officer, it wouldn't let the person in the park know, but it would give the officer the exact location of where that person was. They found out they had safer parks, they had cleaner parks, and they saved money on their police deployment dealing with the problems that they had, where they actually had to send somebody out. So another similar example.
Good. So at this point, I guess we're going to open it up to questions. If you would please come up to the mic and state which community you're from. And then one of the panelists will jump in, depending upon the question. Go state your name.
Hi, how are you? Tewksbury Township. So Hunterdon County, and when I looked on your map, you're coming down and you're hovering just north of Hunterdon County. Are there any plans for you to come into that area? Absolutely. Because we have Comcast in our town, and they tell us, they laugh, you're never going to get FiOS. We're 31 square miles and we're 6,000 residents. So I don't know that we fall under the underserved. We're certainly rural, and we don't all have connectivity, but I don't know that we fall under the underserved. So I'm just trying to see. So a service like yours would be a cost to us.
Go ahead. I should have clarified that. Yeah, so we don't charge the municipality anything. It's free to the municipalities where we build. We make the investment. Now, that doesn't mean that with the broadband funds that we can't work out some type of cooperative agreement where we use that funding and do something together. But as of right now, we have not received a single penny of government money for anything. Well, I did take an NJLOM, but other than that, we have never received anything specifically for broadband. So.
And you did touch on it a bit. We are Comcast, so are they one of the companies that are kind of trying to keep you out?
It depends. Well, they can't keep us out, but it's just, it's really primarily the telephone pole owners. So if it's a telephone company that owns the poles and we're a competitor to them, then obviously, they take their time processing things. But it's all dependent on what the network is like. So in some areas, Comcast has an amazing network. In other places, they bought someone else's network, and the cable network isn't very reliable. Like Optimum in a lot of places is not great. And I'm not dissing anyone in particular. I'm just saying, our experience is people either are happy with the network or they're not. And if you have fiber there, if you have FiOS, then we won't build. But if you have CenturyLink DSL, which I think most of Hunterdon does, then yes, we're very interested in building those areas. Primarily where we're building today is areas where Verizon just has DSL, and where CenturyLink has DSL, and where Optimum or Comcast are the cable company.
So how do we get you down? You have plans to approach us?
Yeah, we will shortly. And if you want, I can give you my card, and we can go through the right-of-way agreement and everything, get that ready to go.
Good.
So, Yeah, and our backbone is actually bigger than what it shows there. So we actually have fiber all the way to Piscataway now. We're in Somerset. We're at 800 Cottontail in Somerset. We have our network there. There's our POP. So we're closer than it looks on the map. That's just where we're actually deploying broadband in large areas.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
thank you.
Need you.
Oh, and we also work with cities with all the smart stuff we're talking about. Like Newton here, we have we help them with their cameras, and we do telematics and all that type of stuff. So we're very much integral with that, and we work with whatever the town needs. We help them take care of it. So.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Jeff
Sure.
Grazel, Mayor of Morris Township in Morris County. And I know you didn't want to diss anybody, but actually got up here to diss Optimum. If there's any option other than Optimum, I want it because they are so unreliable. Everybody in my town hates them. And if what needs to drive them to do better business is competition, then we need competition because Optimum is not serving our state very well at all. That's an understatement. Okay, there you go. So anyway, that said, we'd love to welcome you into Morris Township. That's the only statement. But when I was in the back of the room thinking about where we might deploy our first public network, the thing that came to mind was parks, and then you guys talked about parks. So my question is, if we want to do that in parks, make that our first, because we have community, we have concerts in one park, we have a lot of tennis and pickleball in another park, and it would be great to have that public service of broadband there. So if we don't have anything near there that we can tap into, how do we get it into our parks?
Well, basically, you're going to have to come up with a plan, and you're going to have to put that out to bid to a certain way the public contract laws are. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
The other thing, even with your existing cable companies that you have, Optimum, you're under franchising agreements. You guys all come up with local franchising agreements. These are some of the things that you can start to request in your franchise agreements. So in Bloomfield, for instance, we requested fiber to be run from buildings to buildings that were like miles apart, from a athletic field where the football stadium is and stuff, and parks. So if we do concerts or anything, we can go live, on our local television channel. We can broadcast all these things live as well. So these are things that when you get into franchised agreements, these are things that you could start to request and ask for.
So if we were able to tap into the Optimum network through the franchise agreement, we still would then put up our own pole as, no?
Every infrastructure's
All that infrastructure exists, they would work on it.
They would work on it.
So we work with municipalities with that type of thing. We also do IP. We're not just a phone company. We also do phone systems. We also do IP video surveillance and everything. So we're kind of one-stop shop for a lot of the places that we work with. And we'll install poles. We'll put up cameras. We'll help you get everything centrally. So we do all that kind of stuff, and we'll do it at a very, very reasonable price. So
very good. Morris Township.
Okay. Real quick on that point, Mayor, and this isn't the kind of work I do. It's other kinds of consultants, business and engineering consultants that work with local governments. There are so many different things you can do. I'm going to caution you not to say, oh, these guys did this, I'm going to do that. You need to do an inventory of what your community has, what kind of connectivity is close. Remember, if you're going to put up wireless stuff in the park, there's no such thing as a pure wireless network. At some point, the wireless has connectivity to fiber backhaul. So hiring the right consultant to help you do planning, which will involve an inventory of what options do we have, who can we possibly connect to get the backhaul to the big pipes. That's critical, and there's going to be some money in the infrastructure bill for that. And if you don't want to wait, you might want to find something in your budget to do that. But find out what you've got and what you need first, and then come up with a plan for how to make it happen.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Michael Green, business administrator for the city of Perth Amboy. And I guess I'm going back to American Rescue Plan and the interpretation of that act. Because I know it's saying access to broadband. I know we can interpret that, I guess, liberally, or you can go, with the conservative viewpoint of it. And when I think of access to broadband, I was thinking you can go out and procure different things, for example, like ShotSpotter for police activity, or the plate readers. It's not just definitively the laying of the broadband access. So what is your interpretation on that?
You go ahead first, and then I'll jump in.
Okay. The statute is really encouraging last mile residential access. And so what I would say is that if you have identified places where there is a need and you or a partner are building out there, and you happen to build by a bunch of places where you want to have shot spotter, surveillance cameras, plate readers, stuff like that, then you build those into the plan. But the goal is that the money is generally getting out to provide service to individuals in their homes. So if you only build out to shot spotter and stuff like that, I don't think you're actually going to get in trouble, but I still don't think you want to do it.
Just to highlight on it, there's a trick. I know Perth Amboy was a direct recipient
Yes, sir.
of funds. I mean, there's all these different pots of, as was said earlier, there's all these different pots of federal money that are going to be out there, and each one carries different rules. So you got to figure out which one pot of money is the one that you want to get to your goal quicker. And for us in Piscataway Township, the funds, almost the $7.5 million that we're receiving over a 2-year period, from this year, that's the pot of money we're going to use to accomplish where we want to go, as well as building sewer and water line extensions with it too. So, and just for a notation for everybody here, if when in doubt, pick up the phone of your local congressional office. I'm fortunate, as well as we're represented by Chairman Congressman Blown, who's the chairman of the committee that wrote a lot of the language for this right here. So the end game is, you'd be surprised, a lot of the chief of staffs of all the congressional reps be more than happy to sit down with municipality officials to get to where they go. The last thing they want to see is federal money left on the table, not being spent in the state of New Jersey. Go ahead.
Colin Cherry, Assistant Business Administrator, City of Trenton. We are a city, we're the capital city, and we have fiber in large parts of our community, but we're also very low income and have 70% renter. And a lot of our residents don't have access necessarily to broadband or broadband options because perhaps they don't own the property, maybe the landlord is not interested in that kind of broadband access. What can we do to make sure that those challenges are captured in the inventory of broadband access and places like Trenton aren't left out when determinations of underserved are made?
Yeah. All right, I'll start, and I think Robert wants to come in as well. You raised one interesting point. A couple of years ago, the FCC came out with some rules that prohibited multi-tenant building owners from allowing only exclusive contracts, because we used to have a situation where, like, oh, no, sorry, we signed a contract with whatever the company is, and nobody else can come in. They have found a way around that. I won't get into the details, but there are like mega loopholes. And just recently, the FCC has started a new proceeding to re-examine that issue. So one of the things you might want to look at, because I think it's still open, you might want to have your city attorney check and see if that proceeding is still open. If you need some help, I can give you some contact information. And you might want to file comments and say, we need you guys to do more to provide this, because we have this opportunity now to use this money to promote competitive broadband in these buildings, but we still have a regulatory framework where these companies are getting away with murder, and they're doing what are de facto monopolies instead of outright monopolies. So that's one way to deal with it. Another way to deal with it is just, we did some work with the city of Seattle a number of years ago, where they actually reached out to the multi-tenant building owners, private building owners, their housing authority, and they tried to educate them on the importance of broadband. In the old days, the building owners would get they get a cut of however many units they had. Their property is a lot more valuable and a lot more marketable today if it has good broadband, as opposed to a cut for the property owner. So sometimes education, it won't turn everybody to the right side, but it might get a few. So public outreach and education to your building owners might be another way that you want to look at this.
Yeah. So I don't want to undercut what Ken said. I think you should do all the things that he said. but I'm not sure the FCC will be able to reach down and require landowners and building owners to do proactive things. But the city can, at least in different states it can. San Francisco has a model ordinance that they use to require access, and tenants have a presumed ability to have multiple providers. It doesn't solve the case in the most recalcitrant owners, but like most building owners want to comply with the law. And so the city may be able to pass something like that if you're allowed to under state law. But education is key. A lot of these building owners don't know. If they have an exclusive agreement, it's not enforceable. It's up to them. They can break it if they want to, even if they have a signed piece of paper.
So we have, in our town, there's a high-rise building that's a low-income, I think it's all Section 8, or 99% of it is anyway. And a number of years ago, they signed with a company called Giga Monster. I don't know who they are, but I know that they came in and they literally cut all the phone lines and all the cable lines. And they have horrible service, and their customers are begging us. And we're not going to charge anything to install, but the landlord basically says they can't. Now, there's a rule called OTARD, which is allows people to put antennas up, and the FCC basically, that's the law of the land. You can't, if you're a landlord, you can't keep people from putting up a satellite antenna. You can keep them from affixing it to the building, but if you have a little porch or something, you can put up, a little cement bucket with, or 5-gallon bucket with cement in it and a dish or something. So FCC, this rulemaking process they're doing right now, is basically to say we need that same thing, but for broadband providers. And so, although the law may be that you can't do that and you can't have exclusive agreements, when the person who has the key to the locked closets on every floor won't return your phone calls and won't let you into the building, you effectively have no way to bring service to that building. But the municipality does have a lot more power than they think, although I believe in New Jersey, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm not pretending to be one, but I know in this particular case, we've talked to the town, and the town can't do anything because it's over a certain number, so it falls under DCA. So you talk to DCA to see if there's anything that they can do with their rulemaking to make sure that they open up those, because the town doesn't have any power apparently over this building. It all comes from Trenton. So, and that's in this particular, with my experience. So.
Also, I'd like your card. I work with Detroit, Baltimore, other major cities, so afterward this talk.
Mayor?
Hi, I'm Deborah Keenan. I'm the mayor of Montgomery Township. We're kind of one of these rural, spread out. Deborah Keenan, I'm the mayor of Montgomery Township. We're in Somerset County. We're great, spread out. We have pockets. We have FiOS on like 2 streets. And the first thing we did is we took the FCC data and we mapped it, cleaned it up as best we could. We know there's problems with it. And so now we're thinking about taking our first bit of money to basically go out to our residents and find out what's really going on. Should we, that's kind of the path that we're taking now, to just get really a baseline. We're just getting complaints and pockets here and there. In terms of, should we wait for the 6 months for the FCC to actually clean up, get data? Are we going to get a consultant that's going to look at the same data that we're looking at, or shall we just reach out to the community? What would you advise?
I'm going to be interested to see if Chris has a different opinion. But given my level of confidence in the FCC, I would say do it. Okay. And not just do it, but if you get it done in the next 3 months or 4 months, then there's a way. I mean, the FCC can do with it what they will, but you may want to submit it to the FCC and say, we're here to help, and here's the information that we have, and here's how granular we got in our methodology to determine this, and who knows? I mean, maybe you'll have some impact.
Okay, great, thank you.
This is a problem that we've been solving because we need this data. And so we actually have every single parcel of property in New Jersey. We know exactly if someone goes there and puts their address in, and we have a lot of the towns we've worked with because they need this for how they're justifying it. So, and it doesn't cost you anything. We'll give you a URL that you can use for your town, and we'll give you all the raw data, and it doesn't cost you anything. You can do it today. And it takes me 5 minutes to set it up.
Yeah, we did that, so we got the raw data for the same thing.
No, I'm saying you collect your own raw data. You have a survey that you post on your page. People put in their address. It confirms their lot and block number, does a speed test, figures out who their provider is, and you get all that data. So just give me your card, and I'll take care of it today. You can post it tonight.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Jerry Sineski, I'm the CFO and County Treasurer for Cumberland County. I guess I'm the only South Jersey person in the audience. We have, when you talk about the last mile, it takes us miles to get to the last mile. I mean, we are rural. It's farmland. It's wide open. We're in the process of spending $15 million to upgrade our radio system so that the ambulances don't drop calls going down the road, or the cellular is just as bad. So when this ARPA money came out, we're looking at it and it's okay. We don't have broadband. We're talking about pockets here or there. I mean, we don't have it. I mean, is there enough money for us to actually bring broadband into a county of that size? Geographically, we're huge.
Yeah. Yes. So this is one of the things that I do. I was just on the phone with a guy from Siskiyou County in California. 8,000 people live in that county. It is the size of 1.5 Delawares. They are building fiber out. And North Dakota, if you throw a dart at North Dakota and you hit a rural area, they almost certainly have fiber to the farm, fiber to the home. This is a policy decision. It's about whether or not we prioritize it and use smart business models or not. This is not at all an issue. There's no part of New Jersey that we cannot get a high quality connection to if we're smart about it. And that's where it comes down. I mean, minimum $300 million coming to the state, more money already available that could be prioritized for that could also be used for water projects and things like that. It is a question for the state of whether it wants to set a goal, making sure that everyone's connected. But yeah, like if you look at, I mean, I grew up in Allentown. I've lived in Minnesota now for 30 years. And I'll tell you, like, I'm pretty familiar with rural. And absolutely, we can connect every last home in New Jersey without breaking a sweat if we just use this money wisely, which means do not give it to the biggest telephone companies that have a history of making promises that they do not keep. Make sure you pick your partners smart and you use public investments, where possible, where there's like an oversight mechanism, such as a continued public ownership and a lease to the private sector, things like that. I think and if we're smart about it, we'll get it done.
Okay.
Well, I agree with you on that last statement, Chris, because I remember I was in the thick of things with the Verizon statewide franchise fees in the state, and I remember sitting down with the CEO then. He was swearing that more than half the state was going to have FiOS, and then ultimately they only did, I think, maybe 10 or 15%. And I know there's a lot of areas of certain communities where they did a smidgen where there was a high density, and then they left everybody else hanging out. So, but that's what was set up here, because you're at the whims of large companies. So anyway, go ahead.
So I'm just going to bounce right off. I'm actually from Millville, mayor-elect, so we are representing in South Jersey. So my understanding is, yes, we have absolutely no broadband. But from what my understanding is that Comcast was basically all we were allowed to have, and we weren't allowed to have any other companies come in. So you're not coming in, and the next person's not allowed to come in. And that was from other commissioners, county, and and I'm sure he can elaborate more. But how do we I know you're telling me that they can't stop that. No. So going in as a new elect mayor, I'm ready to kick some, you know what?
She doesn't have broadband in the business district.
Yeah, we have nothing. We have nothing. So I'm the first female mayor in Millville, okay, in history. So I want to go in and make a lot of changes, but I need the help of not letting people say, oh, no, you can't do that. And we were like, no, but actually the rules and the laws are this, and I'm going to make it happen, because businesses won't come in. We have people walking away. You don't have this, you don't have that, and Millville is just falling apart, and that's just unacceptable for our town and our community. So how do we allow other businesses to come in and say?
All right. First of all, what you've been told is not true. Now, this is going to come as a shock, but sometimes these companies don't provide accurate information. Mayor, my cousin, who is not here in the room because she's already been coached by me as the first female mayor of Wyckoff Township. I'll be having a drink with her in a couple of hours, but we'll be happy to let you join the family, and we can talk outside about some of the details. I mean, the bottom line is if you hear from a county commissioner or from some other elected official or a manager somewhere that, oh, my understanding of the law is we can't do that, show it to me, right? Cite me the law. Let's have the township attorney look at it. If that doesn't answer your question, I mean, I'm not saying that, it's not just me, but there are people that you can ask to look at this stuff. The League is a great resource for this. Call Frank Marshall at the League, because he'll tell you, you can do this, and you can use you ought to look at the other communities in your region, decide, does it make sense that we pull some of our resources and do a regional plan for how we're going to bring broadband into this part of the state? And you can do it.
Yeah, because it's not just Millville, it's the county. Cumberland County
Right.
just has nothing. And you were just saying about doing, I would love to be able to do the research for just Millville alone, but I can hand that off to, Vineland Mayor as well. So we can do that to be able to provide that, because I think it's very important. So
Right.
absolutely would love to.
You can do it.
Thank you.
You know what? I feel for you in Millville, because I don't realize how good we have it in Piscataway Township, because we are a telecommunication hub of the state of New Jersey in our community. So we don't necessarily have the challenges as the rural communities do, but we still have pockets of area, believe it or not. We're a telecom hub, and we still have underserved areas in our own community, which is crazy. Anyway, go ahead.
My name is Andy Diamond, Rockaway Township Zoning Officer. A couple questions for Mr. Boyle. Are you in Hopatcon and Rockaway?
Rockaway is one of those recalcitrant townships that has not been very easy to get they finally realized that it's the law, and they actually sent us an agreement last week. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but and we are in Hopatcon today. We're on 15 right now.
That's Jefferson.
Jefferson, but we're planning on heading into Hopatcon. So we're in Ledgewood, we are in Jefferson, and we are in trying to think on the other side, over in Oak Ridge. So we surround Hopatcon, and we're starting to plan our build out.
Mr. Boyle, your system is a separate entity other than Optimum, right?
Correct. We do not use any of
the wires.
Everything. We run everything from scratch.
As far as the infrastructure money, a lot of emergency communications are based on internet. In fact, many police departments are now using internet nodes to receive and transmit police or emergency signals in dead spot areas. Could this infrastructure money, maybe you're not the right person to ask, be used? Would that be a legitimate use?
If you have an underserved area that doesn't have an internet connection, like a tower, for example, that you use as a repeater site, then I think, Chris had answered that earlier, you don't want to use that money to build to that, but if we can build to the underserved neighborhood that's there, and the fiber happens to be at the base of the tower now, we can give you a connection back to the municipal building or the police department or whatever. We provide a lot of services for emergency services and lots of police departments in Sussex County and 911 center and all that stuff. We already provide connectivity to all of those entities.
I hope this doesn't sound naive. Your company basically is competing against the other companies, correct?
Correct.
And I guess you provide the same service at a lower cost. Would that be?
Faster service at a similar cost, usually.
At a similar cost, okay.
Yeah. So we're a little bit less money, but we don't have any of the nonsense charges on our bills.
I apologize, that sounds naive, but
no. I don't know. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, are you, so you're like a unicorn, I feel like, that you're not owned by private equity.
No.
So there's not a lot of these companies around. Like, they're starting up here and there, but a lot of these companies that have been around for almost 30 years, like I kind of catalog them and we track them. And they are getting enormous evaluations. I'm guessing you're getting phone calls like 26, 28 times EBITDA buyouts. So
times revenues.
What times revenues? Okay.
Yeah, so we're not doing that.
So that's the thing, is that like these guys are not hard, or they are hard to find. A lot of the companies that are building fiber in the nation right now are eventually going to be the next Comcast, is my prediction. These guys are the ones that'll hold out as long as your owner doesn't get cancer or something. That's me. Okay, so be healthy. Be very healthy.
Thank you.
So just one more question about that. Your shoot, I had a thought there, and I'm trying to remember what it was now.
Was it the police infrastructure or the radio, or where? You're not in Hopatcon yet, though. But you're almost there.
No, but the tower next to the school that you got, the water tower, we're actually planning to. We have a radio on there already. We're planning to bring fiber to that shortly.
Which
a friend of mine has a repeater on it, so.
Oh, you're a ham then.
He is.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
I believe the last question then. I don't want to get in trouble with Mike Sarah running this over, guys.
I get the last question? Wow, okay, all right. So just wanted to add to what Mr. Boyle was saying. I run a company called Civitas Networks. We do kind of an enhancement to what he does, but wireless, right? Broadband using open 5G, Open RAN type technology, so it's very cost effective. We do this as a partnership with municipalities. Okay, so the point is, though, that in some cases, it may be applications where you want to do that last mile with wireless, and we ride on systems like Mr. Boyle. Actually, I do want to talk to you afterwards about that, working cooperatively on that. But there may be applications, especially, we talked about communities that are completely not connected, I think it was Millville, and others where there's a lot of dense urban type environments where, when fiber gets there, it's going to be amazing. But in the meantime, you might want to look at a wireless system. So I think it's fair to say to anyone in here, and it's a big state, and we do work also, outside of New Jersey and New England as well. There's very similar problems. Other states have the same problems New Jersey has. That there are a lot of people that want service that is good enough. They don't need to run, a server farm in their home. They don't need gigabits of bandwidth. They need enough to do homework. They need enough so they're not sitting outside of Starbucks at night freezing while the kid's trying to do their homework. They need something safe and secure. So that's the kind of thing I'm just saying, wanted to put it out there that we talked a lot about wired broadband, but wireless is also broadband. And I think that needs to be fitted into the equation here. That was my point, so thank you.
We'll give the very, very last question to Nancy Wolf, the New Jersey Office of Cable.
Yes. Mayor, thank you. And the only reason why I wanted to just give a footnote to something Ken said, for those of you who don't know me, I work for the Board of Public Utilities, and I've dealt with municipalities for the last 30+ years with cable licensing. I come to sessions like these because I often get questions that may or may not be in my purview, but I do the best to answer them. The one footnote that I would like to note to what Ken had said, which is about making phone calls for broadband. There was recently passed a broadband study commission. The BPU is heading it up. We have a broadband person for the BPU. It's a new area of regulation, but there's a study that's going on. I'll give the information to Mayor Waller. I think he should be familiar with it. So with that being said, it's under study, and you guys should know what's out there just in case. But I did want to address that issue. I think they know that they got to figure out who's going to deal with it and how it's going to be done. The BPU deals with utilities, and we deal with the right-of-way issues oftentimes, and CLECs and cable companies. So time will tell, but I just wanted to add that one footnote. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And I want to thank everybody for stopping by this very important subject topic matter, which is not going to go away. And we'll see you back next year. Unless, Bob, you have some...
Just one quick... Just so you know, we did videotape and record this whole session. So if you visit our website, jagonline.org, we will make this available to everyone. And we're in booth 230. And if you guys are a municipality, want to get a survey or anything, you can speak to Robert as well. So